Sure.
I mean, I can't believe the weight went up so much. But I've got to get back to doing a day of fasting a week and doing a significant amount of exercise and all. But the YMCA I checked yesterday, and apparently they reopened the YMCA up on Meadows Lane where we have our membership, and they're open from 7 to 11 in the morning, that's all, and then 4 to 8 at night, except on weekends where they're only open in the morning, which isn't good for Nancy
If you
because
could
she
text
works.
me.
Yeah,
so that would be best. And I think you have my number on LinkedIn, and then yeah, if you just want to communicate via text, then we can call. That would be easiest for me because I turn off my notifications for my sanity.
Huh. What was that?
Yes.
You're going to
Somebody
have
else?
a chance. Yeah, you're going to have the opportunity to meet one of our newest, Grace June.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I see Grace. It looks like she's muted herself for a moment,
Oh,
but I'm sure she'll be back with us in just a moment.
oh, okay. Yeah, we'll be up to 3 again. Actually, we usually do, come to think of it, usually one other person typically showed up on Saturday afternoon. Very, never the same person twice, I don't think, but yeah, I think with sticking with it, eventually it will start to grow and probably exponentially, and also it eventually could turn into a pretty good turnout. How come you put down that Mexican restaurant if we weren't going to meet there?
That's what I'm driving at, is that it is part of a default. What I'm probably going to have to do is delete that entire series that you and I created and just recreate a new one. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to feature some new people with this. I was hoping to talk Miss Grace here into it, and there was another gentleman that we met at the other writers workshop who does daily podcasts. Yeah, we really need.
Hey,
hey, how you doing?
good. How are you?
Oh, very good. So Mike Playstead is on by phone.
Great.
Yeah, hi.
Hello.
Mike, could you tell Grace a little about yourself?
Well, I probably, as far as writing goes, because I've been writing things all my life, I actually put out a school newspaper when I was starting in the 6th grade, and put that out for the 3 years of middle school, and actually made pretty good money because back in those days, that's in the 1950s, you only had those spirit duplicators, and they'd make 100 copies. So I made 100 copies of my newspaper, which I did 100% of, wrote everything in it, drew some cartoons, did everything. And they let me go around class to class, small school, but I sold out every week at nickel a piece. So I made $5, and the school supplied all the materials.
Hey.
So I had no expenses.
Entrepreneurial. Very nice.
Yeah, I've done everything since, writing columns and things. But my big thing was writing screenplays back in the 90s. I've written about 5 of those, and I recently published my first novel, In a Dome of Heaven. So I'm working on book 2 of that, and right now I've also got a short story I got about half done that I want to finish, and that's what I'm doing. So anyway, that's my story, I guess, in a nutshell.
Fantastic, thank you.
So
anyway, look up
have you written anything? Have you published anything yet?
Let's see. Just a little couple things here and there, prose or poems. So this is a writing group, not just like a general creative. Is this
Right.
What are
This
we?
is the general creative group,
Okay,
but it's a
well,
mix. Yeah. In
okay,
this general creative group, you will get everything.
okay. Well,
Writers,
I do a
artists.
ton visual arts, writing, mostly photography, but I do different things with my photos, like image transfers onto canvas. I did my note. I would say my most notable work was a project on suicide survivors, which also became a book, a photo book with quotes from the people who were in the photos about their experiences with suicide. So I guess I've self-published 2 books. I did a photo book of self-portraits. I've been doing self-portraits for 7 years, which I've subsequently had to take off the internet because now I'm an insurance professional, and many of them are nude, and I could get fired. So, I mean, you can't really fire a 1099, but like they could, be like, you're too vulgar to be. But they're not like they're. I know what it sounds like, but they're not. They're tasteful. They're artistic. It's not objectifying me in any way. But anyhow, so yeah, a lot of visual art, but writing was like my first love, really, back when I was, 12 years old and living in rural Alaska, and I had not a very pleasant experience in that period of time. So writing was really a place to go to be safe. And now I'm 33, and I started writing about a year ago more consistently. I journal. I've been journaling for years, but that's like, it's mind vomit. I write like short stories. I'm working on a book. I kind of stopped. I really love the book, but I don't know how to get back into it with all my other jobs. I own 3 businesses. So it's, I love writing. I just, setting aside the dedicated time for it. It's like painful that I feel like I can't, but been having some health problems, getting better with my health problems, like way better. So like, that's good. Hopefully I can just, once my insurance business picks up, I'll have like money and then I can dedicate more time to my creative practices. I know everybody says that, but I mean it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of hard to legislate the time. It's so easy to let other obligations and other things take you away from the writing.
Mm.
You really have to push yourself sometimes to legislate that time for yourself to actually sit down and write something every day.
Mm.
Very hard sometimes.
Yeah.
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 So, yeah. So anyway, Bob, you got any up and coming things, contests or anything that?
Ooh.
Any contests? I have not seen anything lately, unfortunately. It's kind of dry right now. I think everyone is still on hiatus. My guess is that everyone's getting ready to rock and roll though within the next month or so. So we should be able to start really posting what's going on. About the only thing I've seen so far, believe it or not, was a news article in New York, coming from New York. I think it was in the Times, and that was that a number of the shuttered businesses down in Soho are actually being painted by artists.
Ooh.
Wow.
So, yeah. And let's see, over by where Grace is, but that's in is it Seattle?
Yeah, I'm in Spokane, thank God.
Okay, and Seattle, yeah, they've got. Did you read about that, Grace?
Yep.
It's the Chaz. They call it the Chaz Zone.
We have a friend who was down there taking video. He's absolutely insane. Actually, he has the same mental health diagnosis I do, so I shouldn't talk.
Okay.
That's fine. But yeah, it's absolutely it's horrible. Oh my God, it's so horrible. I'm so afraid of what's going to happen to the people down there.
Well, I think you can rest assured. I don't think anyone's going to be hurt in the Chaz area. I really do not think so. The governor's all for it. The mayor's backing it. So the police have actually moved out of the precinct. The
Mhm.
precinct is closed.
I
And
recall that. It's just, some of the other leadership in the nation are very hostile and comparing them to ISIS. So
well,
there's that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mike, it's funny because Mike could probably give you a really good history lesson as far as the demonstrations and what happened during the demonstrations. And
Like the 1965 one.
What
I'm
year
gonna,
was that?
Mike, we're talking about, the demonstrations, everything, maybe Watts or
Yeah, that was 1989, I think. Watts riots.
Hmm.
Over Rodney King mostly.
Hmm.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was amazing.
we
Yeah.
we just watched a thing on Netflix. It's called 92, and it showed. I had never seen the footage. It showed the 1991 March 1991 beating of Rodney King, and then a few
Oh,
days.
it was 91. Okay,
Yeah, it
2
was
years up.
mhm.
91, and then the riots were in 92, and there was no real historical context for the entire film other than really presenting the footage that took
Mhm.
place over the course of that about 2-year time frame. And I mean, I was like 6 years old when that
Mm.
was happening, so I had no idea, and I hadn't gone out of my way or learned in school in any of my colleges or anything. And I didn't go seek out the knowledge. And after seeing that, it's just appalling that it seems these things have been happening for decades, and nothing changes. So
Yeah, Mike
Yeah.
and I, yeah, I mean, Mike and I discussed that at length a long time ago.
mm,
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, what was going on in LA in the 60s, Mike?
oh
Yeah. Well, the 60s were a really violent time. And there were a lot of assassinations.
Mm.
Of course, JFK, Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy, Malcolm X, all these assassinations. It was terrible. And, yeah, that was, and then in 1968, there were all those demonstrations and uproar at the Democrat convention in Chicago,
yeah.
and which might have cost the presidency. Nixon won that, but kind of running on that law and order theme, and Democrats looked like they couldn't control things because of the violent demonstrations that were going on during the convention. So the 60s were, I mean, you could write whole books just about the 60s,
Yeah.
And yet there were other things too at the same time. There were a lot of love-ins and things. You had Woodstock in 1969, and you had a lot of peaceful, loving types of things happening. I remember we went down to the Van Rensselaer Estates in around might have been 62 or 3. I can't remember the exact year. Met Pete Seeger, and they were having all these folk songs and peace things, and
Oh.
so they were kind of, it was kind of a balance in a way, yeah, it was quite a strange era, the 60s.
During that, sorry to interrupt, I just want to add to what you said. I believe they said 1965, they called the Summer of Love, and basically they're like, that's what it was for Caucasian people, but for the Black community it was turmoil, chaos, violence, and death. So it was really ironic that it goes down in history as the Summer of Love, but this other very relevant part of history is just kind of like a side note. And thank you for sharing all that with me, because I need to know. Like, I don't understand why history isn't valued by a lot of people. Like, I have an appreciation for what's going on now. I just wonder if anything can actually change, if that's all we're looking at.
Well, things can change, and sometimes it doesn't take a lot, and sometimes the same things happen over and over and over again. Nothing happens, and then suddenly the same thing happens, and the whole world rises up. And this is what happened with George Floyd. The police have been killing people for decades, they just, and getting away with it, and even if they don't really totally get away with it, nothing's happened. And suddenly this time, the entire world has reacted. I mean, not just in the United States, but big demonstrations supporting, doing something about George Floyd's death in many countries.
Wow.
Especially France. And, the whole world has risen up. And this time, something's happening. Those police have been arrested. Chances are, it'll be at least second-degree murder, which is life in prison in Michigan, by the way, with the possibility of parole. First-degree murder is life in prison without the possibility of parole. They don't have a death penalty there. But they've got him charged with second-degree murder, the policeman. But, he was strangling this guy for almost 9 minutes.
Yeah.
And it turns out they knew each other.
What?
Yeah, and I guess they worked together years ago, and they knew each other. And so after 3 or 4 minutes, you got somebody that's pretty much unconscious, and you keep strangling them for another 5 minutes. At some point there, it becomes first-degree murder, because after 3 or 4 minutes, that has to be your intent, is to kill him. So you may get charged, that cop may get charged with first-degree murder. That's a big advance over what's happened in the past, where the police have always gotten off.
Yeah, like when they moved the trial to Simi Valley, and where they would get a fair shake with a jury that looked like them. And then in the case of the shooting of, oh my gosh, I can't remember her name. That's terrible. I just learned about it 2 nights ago and it was late.
The girl.
The young lady who was shot by the
EMT girl.
Yeah. The judge was found guilty by her peers, and the judge was like, actually, she's fine. She's not a danger. She said, I know a criminal when I see one, and there's really 50% of the problem.
Yeah, well, it's they got to be more careful too. I mean, obviously they just had the wrong place, and and this was a clear case of, the guy in the apartment started shooting, but he thought he was getting broken into, and that's obvious because he was calling 911 and saying that burglars were breaking in.
Oh, are you talking about Breonna Taylor? I was talking about a 91. Yeah. So you're talking about Breonna Taylor. Yeah. My God.
Well, these crimes that the police are, aren't really things where with death penalties to them, minor things, like George Floyd, they thought he might have passed a $20 counterfeit bill. Well, they didn't know that. First of all, they didn't know it was him, first of all. And secondly, they didn't know if it really was counterfeit. And 3, they didn't know if it was counterfeit. They didn't know whether he knew it or not. So there wouldn't have been any intent. But there's no death penalty for, $20 counterfeit bills.
No.
And, you just let people go. It's like this guy that just got shot south running away from the cops. And he said he had taken one of their tasers. Well, he was running away from them, though. And, and again, you just let them go. You don't kill them. You let them go, set up, notice which way he's going, and set up a roadblock type of thing, and eventually catch him. But you don't shoot them for people for minor infractions.
I'm super appreciative that you said, in terms of global, international outrage over George Floyd's death, that there may be some indication for change. Like, I really appreciate hearing that, because, the more I learn, I'm thinking, do we just live in the most racist country on earth where this is permissible and always will be? And I mean, I don't mean to be a nihilist. It's just, it's horrifying beyond words. And I'm going to actually do a photo with a couple of my friends who I photographed a lot. I'm going to I'm going to wrap them in a police line do not cross tape and photograph them in a variety of ways. And I'm not, I got a warning from corporate of one of the companies I work for, because I'm an independent contractor for multiple companies, but one of them said, if you post anything political online and you're affiliated with our company, you may be suspended, or there may be consequences. So if I was literally post Black Lives Matter, even though that's a human rights issue, I could lose my career. And that's pretty sick. I appreciate so many corporations coming out and standing for justice. And even my church, my pastor, I was so relieved. The guy's about my age, maybe a little younger. And, it's on the South Hill. It's a more affluent part of Spokane. And I thought, is he gonna skirt the line in order to not lose membership? Because there are a lot of people who are, vote a very specific way. No offense, my whole family is that camp, pretty much. But he came out and said that we need to fight for racial equality, and that it was murder, and that this should never have happened.
Yeah.
And that it's wrong.
Right.
That he wants to listen and be part of the solution and learn. So I got so emotional, and been on the fence about my religious practices as a wayward pastor's daughter. So I would the moment he said that, though, I was like, I'm gonna text them a donation. I was so relieved to hear him say that. I mean, yeah, and maybe things will get better.
Yeah. Well, if you're writing about current events, you got to get right on it, because once you're past the public interest in something, and public interest does wane on everything. If you're gonna have a successful book on George Floyd, for instance, you got to write it right now. You can't put it off, because because once the interest fades, you get no market. So that you have to really focus on and almost put full time in to get it done, and proofread it. And you got to read it several times yourself, and you'll find typos and things every time. By the way, one of the tricks I use on proofreading, I don't know, you might know this already,
You know?
I read from the back page to the front, and that way you don't get caught up in the story, and
Oh,
you'll see the typos and things. But if you get caught, if you're just reading from the front to the end, you get caught up in the story, and then your brain starts to see what's supposed to be there, not what is actually there. So reading it backwards is a way you don't get caught up in the story. And I found, errors after a huge number of readings. I had a screenplay. We did one reading after another of it over and over and over again with various casts and things. And there was an error in there, and absolutely nobody saw it. And then I read the thing backwards and caught it. I had written Justice of the Peace as P-I-E-C-E, peace,
oh no.
which the spelling on spell check was the correct spelling.
Right.
But it needed to be P-E-A-C-E, and absolutely nobody caught that. And I didn't catch it after, like maybe 20 readings, and I never saw it. Read the play backwards, and it jumped right out at me. So, and all these people that were actors and things were brought in, nobody spotted it. Nobody saw it.
Maybe they thought it was intentional and like it had a double meaning or didn't question it.
Yeah. Well, maybe some of them didn't know the difference, didn't know that it was a misspelling. But it's amazing how many times you'll go past an error and not catch it because you're caught up in the story, and your brain sees what's supposed to be there, not what is there. So reading backwards is for me, is a real asset in proofreading. But I just throw that out because not everybody has heard of doing that, and I don't know how common it is actually, but I just mention it as a good way to catch errors, and of course you should have somebody edit the book, but it's pretty expensive. And,
yeah, I would think so.
Yeah. So, especially, of course, once you're established, then publishers will come in and buy up the rights, and they'll edit it for you. But when you're just starting out, they're not going to do that. So, and it can cost you a lot of money. I mean, sometimes even a couple of $1,000 to have a professional editor read it and edit it.
I have a question. Is it strange that I really want to write a book, but I am rather indifferent on whether or not it's ever successful, published, or even read? I just want to write it like that.
Well, there's the old saying, do what you love, the money will follow. Yeah. And just write it for yourself, especially the first book. And don't worry about what anybody will think about it. Don't worry about whether it'll sell or not. Don't worry whether a publisher will pick it up or not.
It depends on my family.
just write it for, almost like it would say, like, for the fun of it yourself. And if you do that and you like it, actually somebody else will like it too. And that's and you want to get at least one book under your belt.
I do.
That kind of establishes you as a writer, and then after that, you can worry more about, whether it's going to sell or not.
Right? Yeah.
But,
Bob, what do you? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I apologize. I was actually looking through some emails. I was going to try to bring something up for you, but go ahead.
Oh,
your question?
I was just wondering how your piece that I heard last time, if you were adding to it, or if you had time, or how that's going, or your other work that I really love.
Thank you. That work is continuing. It's funny because I was talking about Mike. I was talking about it with Mike as far as what I asked you to read in the last meeting. Mike is one of the writers that's been helping me with that occasionally.
Oh, nice.
Clean it up. He'll take a look at it and immediately says, Bob, you need to change this area right here. So,
That's good.
change this to read this instead of this. And that's what I do. I obey. It's funny because as far as my writing goes, I'm at the point where I'm not emotional about it.
Nice.
I just want to ensure that I create something that is going to be saleable and that's going to be entertaining. The reason why it doesn't affect me anymore is because it's already out. I've already written what I wanted to write, so now it's time to make it better. And so, yeah, that's the way I look at it. There's no ego. And when you're in enough of our writers' meetings and you meet some of the other authors, especially many of the authors who have been self-published, you may find, for example, and Mike and I have, Mike, did we lose count of the number of authors we've met that have done this? But, and Mike and Bill talked about this all the time. You'll meet Bill Guthrie eventually.
Cool.
But Mike has said over and over and over again, Bob, make sure that before you send anything out, make sure it's ready to go. So, yeah. Don't let it out because you think because you think it's ready.
Holly, I call her Aunt Holly. She's my mom's cousin, but she is the one that got me started. I think I've written, oh Lord, I mean, I must have written like 8 or 9 chapters by now, which is like a marathon for me, given my experience. But she's the one that got me started. Like I wrote my first chapter the day I was photographing a wedding, and it wasn't time to go photograph yet. She's like, go write your first chapter. I was like, now? She's like, yeah, go do it now. So I did it. She told me, my point to that was, she told me that my first draft is supposed to be my secret draft, but I don't show anybody. But I haven't quite done that particularly. Because I don't know, like my creative ideas are there and like my ability to describe things, but like just a lot of elementary stuff, I'm not experienced. Like the story's there, but I'm not experienced in how to, I think, communicate without distractions. That's the best way I can put it. Yeah. So I'm working on it. So it's so nice to be in the writing groups, and I hear all your all's feedback and like build the scene and tighten up the sentences, whatever that means. I'm still figuring it out. But
Mike can tell you. Since Mike's here, he can break it down very simply.
Ooh, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Mike. That's your cue, Mike.
Well, I'm not sure what to say there.
So as far as a lot of times everyone's telling her to tighten up her work.
Well, I hear other people say it to other people. I haven't been told it often myself, but I don't, does it mean just condense it and use less words to communicate your meaning more succinctly so that you just like, so it's, I don't know, more effective? Is that what that means?
Well, your first draft is really awkward, really. What you do is you write a long story. I mean, this is what Hemingway always did his books this way. What he would do is he'd write 800 pages, and then he'd force himself to eliminate 50% of all the words. And then he's down to 400 pages. And then he'd force himself to eliminate 50% of the words. And then he had a 200-page book, but it would read very quickly. It was very concise, and that was his method of writing, and that might work for you.
Yeah, I could do that.
Yeah, because if you can eliminate a lot of words, 3/4 of them sometimes, and actually not lose the story. It would leave readers to fill in, perhaps fill in some, what happening, but then they're using their own imagination to visualize, and that's actually what you want them to do. And the book almost becomes what's the word I want? Where you an outline in a sense. I mean, it isn't really an outline, but it's sort of like that. In the an outline is quite brief. I mean, you can outline an entire book in maybe 10 pages or something. Outline the events, just list them, and then you fill in dialogue and descriptions and things. But if you can cut, you write the book, and then you cut down the pages tremendously, like Hemingway did, the book almost becomes like an outline, and then the reader is filling in, a lot of the action and stuff and visualizing it, and they love that. And it's just, and you get something that really just snaps the line. And yeah.
I have a question about that, if I may.
So, yeah.
Could I ask you to elaborate on that just a little, because like the feedback I've been observing is, build the environment with descriptions, and like the way the person looks, what the mood is, like what the structures are like around them. So like I find that like, basically including a lot of imagery, but to me, it sounds like what you're saying is leave something for the imagination, which I find interesting because like in the book I'm writing, I haven't even described what the main character's physical appearance is. And I don't include a lot of like, I'm very capable of doing imagery and visuals that are incredibly detailed and interesting, whatever. It's just, I was under the impression the quote unquote right way is to include as much detail as possible, but you sound like you're a very experienced writer and you're saying maybe that's not essential.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you don't want to, Hemingway, or a lot of his books are just filled with pretty much simple sentences. They don't have a lot of adjectives and adverbs in them because the reader can fill those in. You don't need to describe every color and every detail and every breed of flower that might be in the field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was my instinct as well. I'm like, what, what I'm like, just, I don't want it to be too much. I don't have time for it. And I don't expect other people to just like hang in there while I like, have word, gasms.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you ask yourself, does a reader care? I mean, you can say, if somebody's wading through a field of flowers, you don't have to mention that, they're purple petunias or whatever. It's.
I'm really glad to hear you say that.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to say it.
Because I thought I did.
Yellow daffodils and white white lilies and tiger lilies. Well, does anybody really care? Isn't enough just to mention that there's a field of flowers. You can keep it simple, and the reader can just sort of visualize his own favorite flowers or something. It's not. You don't have to go to a lot of detail, and try and use, this might be bad advice, I don't know, but try and use simple sentences. Um, uh, in my book, I don't have a lot of descriptive phrases and things. It's really very basic, simple language, and there's none of the flowery details, because as far as I'm concerned, nobody cares. They just want to know what the action is, and so you keep it simple. You can fill in a lot of adjectives and descriptions and things to make the book longer, but shorter might be better. I mean, to this day, I think one of the best books I ever read was Night Flight by Anton de Saint-Exupéry, famous for writing The Little Prince, but he wrote this book called Night Flight, and I've read this book about 50 times over the last 50 years, 60 years actually. Yeah, it's about 60 years, and I've loaned it out, never comes back, and I've bought it about 10 times, but it's only 84 pages long.
Really?
And yeah,
See if I can get this on ebook right now.
Very simple, very direct, and very powerful because of that. And it's a power philosophy. How one person has great power, but with that power becomes, has that great responsibility, and it's kind of a curse in a way, and you have to make really hard decisions, and sometimes life and death decisions, the last line in the book is Revere, the mighty, bearing the heavy burden of victory. And
is it by David Gilman?
Yeah. Well, you ought to read the book.
I know. I'm looking it up now. Who's the author?
Yeah, Anton Saint-Exupéry.
I got it. Okay.
He's the same guy that wrote The Little Prince, so if you put in Little Prince, you'll come up with
I
his name.
love that book. It is I know it's a children's book or whatever. I love that book and The Alchemist.
There you go.
I absolutely. Okay. I'm getting it now.
Yeah, he wrote Night Flight, I think around 1932, 1928. I don't know. It was about the first airmail flights from Chile to Argentina across the mountains, and it's an incredible book, and it's really a good lesson in writing, because that book could have been 400 pages long, but it's only 84. But boy, it just grabs you.
I'm gonna read it this weekend. I just bought it.
Wow. So, yeah, so anyway, I've never known anybody to be able to put it down. Everybody that I've ever loaned it to, and myself, and they start reading it, and you don't put it down until you're done. It's you just can't stop reading it. It just grabs you, and it holds you, and all. So, but anyway, it's a good lesson in writing, I think, and you'll see there's not a lot of flowery description in it. It's just what's happening directly told, and it's really ideal. But you can't go wrong to read it. And like I said, it's only 84 pages, and almost impossible to stop reading once you start.
Well, I believe
So-
it because when I read The Little Prince, and I know it's just a short book, but I was like, I was gripped. I absolutely gripping, riveting content. I can't explain. I think it was just on an archetypal level that it reached me to my core. So I'm really
Yeah.
excited to read this book, like a adult. Like I really
Yeah.
struggle with reading. I know very, very, very active, overactive brain. So I really, the first book I read in years was Holly's book, the Las Vegas murder mystery. I absolutely loved it, and that's what inspired me to like start writing again, actually.
Yeah. Well, like I say, you can't go wrong with it, and well, that's my suggestion anyway.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm hoping we can go back to actually having a meeting place and actually getting together in person.
I will
someplace.
fly to
I don't know when
Vegas
that's going to
meet
happen.
you and Bob. Like,
Yeah, actually, I thought this today was going to be that because we had the Mexican new location, the Mexican restaurant,
ooh,
which was very, very close to Grabber Green, where we were meeting on Saturdays.
my mouth is watering just thinking of
So I kind of thought we were really going to do that. I almost drove down there. So, yeah, it's a long way for me.
Me too. I'm in Washington. I have to use my Alaska Airlines credit and get on the plane.
Yeah. Wow. All righty. Well, I've got to go. It's
same here.
It's after 5, and
Yeah.
I was planning on just if we did have that meeting, I was going to leave at 5.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
I've got a lot of things to do. But so I'm